Mark Carney unveils the elite's plan for a new world in the next crisis. Now, he went on to say that a plan beats no plan. And while most people have been caught off guard by the response of the global crisis that has happened over the last year, I know that many are still waiting for things to return back to normal. But if you're paying attention, you might understand that there is no new normal to return to. So, what does the future hold? How will it work? What will it look like? Well, Mark Carney and our friends at the World Economic Forum and the rest of the elites, they have a plan. And it's one they are very proud to tell us about. It's not a conspiracy. It's on their websites. It's in their books that they're writing. And it's in speeches that they're giving all over the world. All you have to do is pay attention, and you're going to see that the global leaders tell us the future they want holds and what we should be expecting. Now, even more specifically, they tell us what parts of our lives will have to be changed and what we should expect. So in this video, I'm going to break down what Mark Carney's book and his statements say. We're going to lay them out in a very clear way. I'm going to discuss the implications of this. I'm going to tell you how we should be navigating this and how I believe the future ends up. I'm going to give you some hope for the future, but if you're not paying attention, it's not going to work out well for you. So let's go. All right, now real quick before we dive in, my name is Mark Moss, and I make these videos because I want to change the way you think about money. Because if you can learn to see it and think about it differently, then it can create massive change for your life, give you more options, more freedoms for yourself, for your family, for your legacy. That's why we talk about these things. Now, these are deep subjects. I try to make them easy to understand. And if you want to help me get them to more people, so more people can open up and see what's happening, just take one quick second, click on that like button so the algorithm sends it to more people, and hit that subscribe button and the bell notification if you're not already. Okay, now let's dig in. All right, digging in. So let's talk about where the elites are taking us, what their plan is for our lives. Again, they're telling us in their books, they're putting it on their websites, they're telling us in their speeches. Now, some people think this is a conspiracy, but I tend to take them at their word. So let's talk about that, what that means, because you need to understand how you need to navigate this. It's serious stuff. So the first thing you have to understand is that the world is trending towards totalitarianism. What does that mean? That means control, right? So we have lots of isms: capitalism, socialism, fascism, communism, you name it, right? Libertarianism or whatever. But they're all different shades of different things. And so at the end of the day, we have two systems. We have one that's centrally planned and controlled, captured, centrally planned, or we have one that's free, open, and competitive. And so we can see that we're moving from a free and open system into a captured and controlled system. And so the words that we use, the fascism, the socialism, the communism, they start to lose their meaning. But the reality is, if you break through those words and their meanings and understand they're all shades of sort of the same color, they're all the same thing, which leads to more control, more captured control, more control of our life. So totalitarianism can kind of be summarized as the exercise, a society that exercises an extremely high degree of control over both public and private life. All right, so that's totalitarianism. You can call it whatever you will, socialism, communism, whatever. But basically, they tell you almost every area of your life in public and in private that they can control. What you can put in your body, what you have to put in your body, where you can go, what you can say, and so forth. You get the idea. And so you can see that we have this trend. The world has been trending towards this totalitarianism. I would say that what changes that? Does the government wake up one day and say, we have too much freedom. Why don't we give back a little bit more? We have too much control. Why don't we give back a little bit more freedom? And I think the answer is no, they don't do that. All right, now, what are the triggers that they use to implement this? How does the state continue to amass power? How do they continue to get more and more control over our lives? Well, one of the biggest things that they do is they use fear. If they can scare us enough, then we need them to protect us. We need safety, right? If they can use words like oppression and fairness, so you can't get ahead because you're a minority or this gender or whatever it is, you're oppressed. And so because of that, you need us to come save you, right? These are all triggers they use to gain more power. Terrorism. So, hey, we have this terrorism. They're going to come kill all of you. And so you need to give up your freedom. You need to let us listen to your phone calls and strip search you all the time in order to protect you. That's the Patriot Act is a perfect example of that. Of course, I won't say this word, but you get that. If everybody's scared and they're afraid to go out, they're afraid to even talk to people because they're walking bags of germs, then they can tolerate locking down. And then the ultimate one where we're going to, which we're going to talk about today, the ultimate scare the one where they've checkmate on society is that they can scare us about the climate, right? The whole world is going to die. The whole world is going to be destroyed if you don't give up all your freedoms. Now we can take a look at this. This is nothing new. This is the way it's been for hundreds of years. We can go back to this quote from Benjamin Franklin here. He said that any society that would give up a little bit of liberty, a little bit of freedom, in order to get a little bit of security, right? So that anybody who would be willingly give up their freedom to get a little bit of safety will deserve neither, and they'll end up losing both. So we were taught this lesson a long time ago. Some things we can't be taught. We have to learn them the hard way. One of my favorite economists, Austrian economist Hayek, he said kind of the same thing. If you're willing to surrender your freedom for security, those who are willing to surrender their freedom for security have always demanded that if they give it up, if they give up their full freedom, then it should also be taken from those who are not prepared to do so. And so think back through this crisis we've been going through for the last year. Some people are really scared. Some people aren't. Well, the some people that are really scared are willing to be locked in their houses and give up all their freedoms. But rather than them just doing that and for themselves, they demand that you give those up as well. And we can see again throughout history how this has been used. So this was the Patriot Act. So of course, after 9/11, the big scare of terrorism, this big invisible army that we may never be able to beat, we have to give up all our freedoms in order to fight that. And so we gave up all types of liberty after the Patriot Act. We lost a lot of stuff in the freedom of speech. We lost a lot in our freedom of association. We lost a lot in the access to government information that we're allowed to get. We lost a lot in the realm of unreasonable searches and seizures. We lost a lot in the due process, the way that the law is supposed to work. We lost a lot in the way that we can be represented in the legal manner. We lost a lot in the way that we're entitled to a speedy and public trial, and on and on and on. And so we lost that. And we can see that again in this crisis that we're in right now, or the next crisis, I should say, they really want to step things up. So under a climate lockdown, governments would limit private vehicle use, ban consumption of red meat, and impose extreme energy saving measures, while fossil fuel companies would have to stop drilling. So think about this, impose extreme energy saving measures, like maybe you can't fly very often, maybe you can only drive your car one day a week, one day a month. Maybe you have to be okay with being out without electricity for 4 hours a day. Those are the types of things, right? And we can see that the climate crisis would be distinct from a health crisis, and the economic crisis is caused. But the three crises and their solutions are interconnected. They're interconnected, all right? So we're tying all that together. And to give you an idea of what they're talking about, we're going to dig in this a little bit more. But to give you an idea, the Rockefeller Foundation, which you might remember ran the studies on what would happen through a virus pandemic. Well, they're also running similar studies, and they show that governments could use lockdowns to tackle climate emergency. Lockdowns for a climate emergency. You getting that? We need to move quickly if we want to transform the future of work and transit and energy. That's a crazy article. I'm not going to dig into that because I have more to get into. But how are they going to impose this? How are they going to enact this control? How are they going to amass this power in order to manipulate the world economy for their good? Well, it's something called ESG. Now, I've talked about this in a previous video, but this is a new set of guidelines that businesses must adhere to if they want to continue to be in the marketplace. Now, this stands for environmental, social, and governance. Just think about those three words: environmental, social, and governance. Now, what's important to understand about this is that these are objectives that are being enforced. Now, these aren't new laws. We didn't vote on these. We didn't vote people into power to put these in, but these are being done through force, or more being forced onto businesses through policies, all right? Not by legislation, but by application. All right. And so this is being put together by non-governmental, non-democratic. So we didn't vote on this. That's what I'm saying. We didn't vote on this. This isn't the government. These are non-governmental agencies that's doing this, and they're putting pressure on the corporate sector to change. And so they're forcing this to happen through corporations as opposed to taking away people's freedoms and forcing them to do that. All right. And things like sustainable finance. And so basically, if you want money, If you want debt to grow, if you want a credit line to buy new equipment for your business, you want money to get that new factory or that business, that building, whatever it may be, well, then you must adhere to this. Or if you're not compliant, then you'll be starved of funds. Starve non-compliant companies of funds. That's how they do that. As Carney puts it, which we're going to dig into, Mark Carney and all the great things he has to say, he puts it that it would be climate roadkill. So basically, if your business doesn't adhere to this, if you don't bow to the mob, if you don't buy into all this and make these changes they require, then you will be, as he calls you, climate roadkill. All right. Now, the definition of liberty, as I've come to understand it from Hayek, and he says that it's free from coercion. All right. That means that I have the right to move my life in the direction that I see fit without being coerced or forced to do that. Now, coercion means that I have the right to choose something that leads me to the ends that I desire. So if I'm given two choices, either take this poison or I'm going to kill you, I have a choice, but either one leads me to their decision, not mine. So that is what coercion is, which I think as you start to understand this, this is exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about coercion. All right, so now let's dig into Mark Carney. All right, so Mark Carney is an elite. He is the elite of the elites. Who is he? Well, he's former Bank of England, the oldest central bank in the world, head of the Bank of Canada, of course. He's a trustee with our good buddies at the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab. They're good friends over there. He's also part of the UN, right? Special envoy on, of course, what? Climate action and finance. Remember, he said they'll be starved of funds. They'll be climate roadkill. So he's part of the climate action and the finance on the UN Special Envoy. He's also the advisor to British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. He's also the advisor to the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. And he's recently written a book called Building a Better World for All. Now, he's an elite of elites. He's the one advising the elites, the Canadian PM, the UK PM, the UN, the World Economic Forum, and on and on and on, the central banks. So this is a guy that we may not like what he has to say, but everybody else does. So that means we better pay attention. So what the heck is he saying in this book? You might want to go read it because you may not believe me. So he's talking about a working model. So first thing he says is that capitalism has been corrupted. So that I would agree. What we have today is in no shape or form capitalism, which I would define as a free exchange, right? So when win-win situations happen, if you and I were to enter an exchange, you want to buy my car, we want to exchange different stocks, we want to barter, whatever it may be, both of those participants believe they're getting the upper hand. Otherwise, the exchange wouldn't happen. That would be a win-win. Both people think it's good for them. In a government-run situation, one party has to lose. That's a win-lose situation. So what we have today is not really a free exchange, a free market overall, because what we have is the government using corporations, cronyism, crony capitalism, to push their agendas. And so I would agree with that point. It's been completely corrupted, all right? But it's not capitalism's fault. It's not free markets. It's the government changing free markets. Now, he says that that has caused a climate emergency. So first we have to agree, what is the emergency that we have? What are the implications of that? What should we do to mitigate that? But it's also pretty interesting to say that he says that capitalism has caused the climate emergency. When you think about the central bank, their policy is that we should have 2% inflation a year. Their policy is that everyone should keep spending to keep the economy going. They want to stimulate the economy by pumping more money so we all spend more, we consume more. Zero down credit cards, low rate loans, etc. Spend, consume, consume, consume. Well, wouldn't that be leading to climate change? Wouldn't the option of slowing down climate change be to consume and throw away less? So is it the fiat money system that's causing this, not what he's calling capitalism? Anyway, let's keep going. He says that this threatens life on Earth. So remember what the triggers were, right? If we have to fear for our safety, then we are willing to give up our freedom. Or so he says. And so if they can come up with the biggest scare in the world, which is it threatens all life on Earth, it's the ultimate scare. The ultimate scare gives them the ultimate control. Now, he's a fan of Karl Marx, which of course, Karl Marx is making this comeback. Everybody wants to listen to him today, but it's a little bit different. And so it's important to understand this. So under Marxism, they believe that the state should control the means of production. He thinks it's a little bit different in a sense where the private sector is not to be taken over, but rather be made a partner a partner with the government in reshaping the economy and society. Cronyism, kind of like what we're seeing right now, where the government pushes their will onto the corporations like the airlines or the social media companies, sort of like that, yeah. His suggestion does not make a promise to make lives of ordinary people better, but actually worse. So this is in his book. His suggestion on how to fix the problem that threatens all life on Earth isn't about making our lives better. He promises to make our lives worse. So let's figure out what the heck that is and what he's saying, all right? So he says in the book that your sacrifice is needed. Your sacrifice. You can see here he is at the World Economic Forum talking this up. He says, quote, it requires rigid controls on personal freedom. So remember, wearing a mask doesn't protect you. You need to wear a mask to protect me. Right? That's how that works now. So in order to save life on Earth, in order to not kill everybody on the Earth, you have to give up your personal freedoms. That's the way it works in his world. So it requires rigid controls on personal freedom. We need to see massive changes to industry and corporate funding, like I said, or like he already said earlier. If they don't comply, if businesses don't comply to these new demands, these ESG demands, then they would be, as he said, roadkill, right? So they won't get any funding. He says that we must be willing to have severely constrained choice, less flying, less meat, more inconvenience, and more poverty. That's what we have to be willing to have. That's the sacrifice we have to be willing to make to apparently save the whole world. He promises that assets will be stranded. Used gasoline-powered cars will be unsaleable. You won't even be able to sell it. And inefficient properties will be unrentable. Oh, your real estate that you didn't want to keep up? Your real estate that you didn't want to spend all this money to fit this ESG narratives? Sorry, you can't use it anymore. Remember, you're going to own nothing. You're going to be happy, right? So, oh yeah, those cars, you just can't use them anymore. Sorry. Oh, those houses, they're no good anymore. See how that works? All right, let's keep going. I have hope for you. I have hope for you. Hang on. It's not all bad. Now, history's story tells us that this doesn't work. Now we know this, right? We have hundreds of years of proof of this ideology being put into practice and failing over and over and over. As a matter of fact, to talk about Marxism and it succeeding would be like arguing that the earth is flat, right? We know the earth isn't flat. At one point, people thought it did. Today, we have lots of tools and technologies that tell us otherwise, and we know that the earth is not flat. And so anyone arguing that would be laughed at. And for anyone to argue that Marxism would work should also be laughed at. We have 100 years of it failing every single time. Never worked, never once, and it's left hundreds of millions of people dead in its wake. As a matter of fact, it's the most lethal ideology that's ever been produced. Now, what the argument that socialists would have is they'd say, well, look, man, you can't make an omelet without breaking a couple eggs, right? It's necessary. What happened is, we have to do all this bad stuff so that we can rise from the ashes. That's what Marx thought, and have this utopian communist dream. And it just hasn't been done right. And so, it's necessary to have that damage, but then we'll have the omelet on the other side. But throughout history, we got a lot of broken eggs, hundreds of millions of broken eggs, and we got no omelet. We got no omelet at all. All right, now let's keep going. All right, now we know how this ends, and that's the good thing. Now there's hope on the other side, like I said. It may not be a smooth transition, but let me explain. Now, I love this quote here. If the Eskimos ever went socialist, they'd have to import ice. It's an amazing quote that really sums up a lot of things, and I want to show you some proof. I want to back that up. So in Cuba, for example, under Fidel Castro, some people think he's great for whatever reason. I grew up seeing people risk their life in shark-infested waters on rafts trying to make it to Florida to escape this great paradise. But in Cuba, they're famous for being a sugar-producing nation, right? That's one of their main exports. But under socialism or communism or whatever you want to call it, Fidel Castro, they had to actually import sugar. They lose sight of things like motivation, incentive, and things like that. And so they couldn't even get their own sugar. They had to import it, right? We've seen in Venezuela, one of the richest nations in the world for natural resources, including oil. They couldn't produce oil. As a matter of fact, they had to start importing it. We can see again, Venezuela. The country with the largest oil reserves in the world, right here, number one, above number two, Saudi Arabia, is Venezuela. They could be the richest nation in the world if they would have followed Saudi Arabia's lead. But no, they decided to socialize that, and the number one oil reserves in the world, they can't even get the oil out of the ground. And now they're falling apart. As you can see, the amount of oil that they've been able to produce has just consistently gone down and down and down. Back to the Eskimos in the ice, they'd have to import ice. There's a couple good examples we can look at. It would take too long to go through them all. Western East Germany was a really good example because you took the same country, the same population, the same people, and you put a wall up down the middle, and it was like the perfect experiment in the world. One thing that was interesting in that, lots of interesting things about that, I'd recommend you go study that. But one thing that was interesting is on the border, both countries had armed guards, right? Had their military, but they both faced the same direction. What does that mean? They both faced east. So the West was facing east to prepare for an attack from the east, but the East was also facing east. They weren't facing the West to protect from an invasion. They were facing east to prevent people from escaping. All right. Now, another couple good examples are Taiwan and the PRC, or South and North Korea. South and North Korea, again, the same little island nation. You split it down the middle, same people, same culture, same everything, and we got different results. Let me show you a couple pictures and examples of this. So this is a pretty good, a picture's worth 1,000 words. So here's North Korea and here's South Korea. That kind of gives you an example. But let me give you some concrete things. So let's look at poverty. In North Korea, more than 40% of the population is below the poverty line because a major portion of the GDP is spent on the military. 40% of the population lives below the poverty line, and that then cascades into the rest of the country. So then height. South Koreans are comparatively 3 inches taller than people in North Korea. Remember, this is the exact same people, the exact same little island nation, the exact same culture. And yet now, because of the differences in poverty and so forth, they're actually 3 inches taller on average. We see the GDP. So the GDP of South Korea is 1.38 trillion. 1.38 trillion compared to North Korea's 12 million. I'm going to pause. That's a pretty big difference. And then, of course, that leads into life expectancy. So we can see North Korea has 25 million citizens, and they live up to age 72. South Korea has 50 million, so double the amount of people, 50 million citizens, where the people live up to 92 years. It's a big difference. And then we can see it in other areas of life like this, for example, internet usage. So in North Korea, you need to have permission to join the internet. Usually that's only for wealthy and powerful people if they qualify. And if they do, if they qualify, if they can get permission, they get listed only 28 websites that they can go to, right? But in South Korea, they have the fastest average internet connection anywhere in the world. A lot of electronics come from South Korea. They're that advanced. So we can see the stark difference. One just doesn't work. It never works. Now, like I started out in the beginning, we have this constant push towards totalitarianism. The whole world is moving towards more control, more centralization of power. And what breaks that trend? As I posed the question in the beginning, does the government wake up in the morning and say, we have too much control, let's give some freedom back? And the answer is no. So in my opinion, what breaks this trend is competition. All right. Like I said, there's two different types of systems. Forget all the isms. There's two types. There's free, open, competitive. There's captured, controlled, centrally planned. That's it. All right. Those are the two types of rules that we have. And I believe that we'll see competition continue to increase. So for example, in the United States, California and New York were the two strictest states of lockdowns during the pandemic. Well, mass exodus out of California. In addition to before the pandemic, California had problems because of too much taxation, too restrictive for business to operate. And so all the rich people, all the big businesses were leaving California. Most of Hollywood is gone. I believe California is ranked number 4 in movies in the United States now. Most of Silicon Valley has left. Oracle was like one of the last big companies that left. Elon Musk left. When he said he needed to leave, one of the California representatives tweeted, "F you, Elon." He tweeted back, point received. Nevada and Texas competed for his business. And so all these people of California, Texas has outcompeted California. And what's happened? The governor Great Newsom, dictator Newsom in California is being recalled. Same thing in New York. Again, super strict tax laws, super tough to do business there. Very, very, very tough lockdown restrictions. And so everybody left to Florida. Wall Street went to Florida. New York Stock Exchange, Goldman Sachs went to Florida. They've been outcompeted. Governor Andrew Cuomo went on the news and said, basically begging and pleading, please, rich people, come back. I'll even cook you dinner if you come back. And so they've been outcompeted. But what about when the world starts to compete? What about when the world starts to compete? So for example, while the world was locking down, there was other countries that were still pretty open and free. Come here, start a business. Come here, live open and free. Now we're seeing countries in South America starting to change their monetary system. They're outcompeting. And as that continues to pick up steam, the countries that are left trying to be captured, controlled, centrally planned will be forced to change their ways. We know this because, again, it's played out throughout history over and over and over. China is a perfect example of that. They were one of the strictest communist countries, and they realized that they were living in such poverty, there was no way to compete on the world stage. So they opened up some free trade zones. They opened up some capitalism, and that capitalism has allowed them to grow like wildfire. They had to change. They had to ease the restrictions. They had to give more freedom back to the people in order to compete. That's what changes this trend. All right. Now, there is great hope. All right. Now, there are scary things. Like I said, the World Economic Forum, our buddies Klaus Schwab, Mark Carney, they have a plan. They have a plan for the way they want the world to work. And you need to understand what that is so you know how to navigate that. However, we have the tools to fight back. We have the tools to resist that right now. We also know history. We know that history shows us that they don't win. We know that history shows that human freedom always wins. In my previous video, I'm gonna have the editor link it right here. I'm talking about 3 revolutionary cycles. I talk about how there's these 250-year revolutionary cycles where we go from centrally planned and controlled into a decentralized system. And we are at that point right now. Again, go back and watch that video. We know the progress, and there is great hope for us on the other side. Now, the transition is not going to be easy. The transition is not going to be fun, especially for those that are not paying attention, those aren't being prepared. We need to prepare ourselves financially, which is why I talk about these topics. We need to prepare ourselves kind of emotionally. We have to prepare ourselves and be ready to move as needed. But just know that there is great hope on the other side. And how do we do that? How do we end up pushing this forward? So the big thing is that we have to start taking away their power. What is their power to continue to gather this control over our lives? It's the money printer. It's the money printer, right? Remember what Mark Carney said is that they have to be economic roadkill. So basically he's talking about starving all these companies of capital if they don't comply. But where do they get the unlimited capital? From the money printer. We need to take away the money printer. Of course, how do we do that? By taking our money out of the financial system, taking it away from that and going into a new system. You know what I'm talking about. That will speed up the competition. And so imagine, for the last 100 years, America was that shining example, and people in oppressive regimes all around the world would leave those regimes to come to America. For what? For freedom. For a chance to have a better life, for a freedom to direct their lives as they see fit, to have sovereignty, right? But when they had to leave those oppressive regimes, they had to leave everything behind. They couldn't bring their real estate, obviously. They couldn't carry their gold, and they weren't allowed to get their money out of the bank accounts. But imagine when I can go to any country in the world, and I can have all my wealth stored cryptographically. I know 12 words in my head. And as soon as I get to that other country, if I have to swim naked to get there, once I plug into a computer, I can have all my wealth. Now, if I'm able to leave a country, like so many have done over the last 50, 60 years coming to America, 100 years, but that nation keeps all my wealth, how much does that really affect them? Not very much. But what if I can take my wealth with me? Now that changes things, and that speeds up the competition. So we need to be prepared to vote with our feet and with our money, and that's how we affect change. The elites have a plan. I'm not happy with the plan. I do not comply. I won't live in the pod. I won't eat the bugs. And hopefully you won't either. It's not going to be a smooth transition, but history says we win. Let me know what you think. Leave me a comment down below and let me know what you think. Are we going to win? Give me a thumbs up on this video if you like it. You know I'm working hard to bring these videos to you each and every week. And of course, if for some reason you don't like it, which I'm sure I'm probably going to get a lot of people who don't like this video, go ahead, give me a thumbs down. But leave me a comment and let me know why. I'd love to hear your questions, and we can talk about those in the comments down below. All right, that's what I got for you today. to your success. I'm out.